Oh, hey, it's Barry. So a lot of things been going on recently that's been showing us that game and gaming preservation is just something that is really important. We had the whole emulator scandal with Nintendo where they went after Yuzu. We have games disappearing from the Sony library video right in the cards. There's a lot of push over at the gaming companies like Xbox and PlayStation to drop live service games. Xbox has the whole Game Pass, all digital. You don't really own anything. And a lot of these things seem to be causing issues. As many loved video games when it comes to the PlayStation 2 era, PlayStation 1 era, a lot of older video games has just been lost with time. It's not able to be played on the current systems. It's not compatible. If you put a CD in, it doesn't even read. And many fans of these older titles have a sour taste in their mouth because of this. It seems that the online sentiment towards digital games has really soured within the past couple years due to actions by the gaming companies and how they treat their games and consumers. But it seems today a win has been given to the community that likes precious old video games, retro gaming, anything like that, because it seems that the PlayStation 5 may be getting an emulator. And of course, there's a catch. But before we get into it, I'd really appreciate if you could smash that like button, hit that subscribe bell, as I'm really trying to grow the channel right now, and it really helps out the YouTube algorithm, so I'll really appreciate it. So getting into the headlines here, it says that PS5 might be getting a PS2 emulator, but don't get too excited just yet. Implicit Conversions is apparently working with Sony to bring PS1, PS2, and PSP games to modern consoles. And real quick, for anybody who don't know who Implicit Conversions are, they are a retro gaming company. They bring back classic games. Go to their website and check their What We Do page. It says here, introducing Syrup, an advanced emulation engine to bring 8, 16, and 32-bit games to modern consoles. Also says that they allow developers to interface retro and modern consoles like the PlayStation 5 or Nintendo Switch. Its architecture handles display, audio, controls, network, and add-ons like trophies, and consists of multiple emulators modified to be lightweight plugins. It optimizes for reusability of the front-end features and portability of the emulator plugins. And the features of it is you can add multiplayer, rendering, post-processing, can get trophies, custom AVs, controller upgrades, and allows remasters and modernization of the older games. So it's a really good developer tool that Sony seems to be working with to bring out a whole new emulator that can play PS1, PS2, and PSP games, which is kind of a lost era unless you still have those systems. It's really hard to get to play those games unless you emulate it from somewhere kind of shaky. And it just shows the difference in philosophy when it comes to these gaming companies, whereas Nintendo went ahead and hit Yuzu with an entire lawsuit suing them for millions of dollars. But Sony is actually working with their emulator, using their tools to help make a better product for the end consumer, make a better emulator. That's something I can always commend when a company does something good for their end consumer. But moving on with the article, it says here that it looks as though the PS5 may be getting a wave of classic PlayStation 2 games in the not so distant future. This info comes courtesy of a company called Implicit Conversion, which claims on its website to be working alongside Sony to bring retro games to modern consoles. Sony has already brought various PS1, PSP games into modern Sony consoles via the PlayStation Plus Premium Classics collection, including Resistance Retribution and Jet Moto 2 last month. However, statements that have been recently popped up on the company's socials indicate that PS2 is now on its radar, which is potentially good news for those who haven't played around with those 6th gen classics. And classics they are, as there are some really big games that dropped in the PS2 era that actually defined gaming for the foreseeable future. Games such as Jak 2, Grand Theft Auto 3, got Final Fantasy X, Resident Evil 4, all these games dropped in the PS2 era. Devil May Cry, of course, like Some of these games are iconic in their own right. The original God of War dropped on this, and God of War went on to be a huge series, selling millions and millions of copies for all different consoles after the PlayStation 2 ended. So a lot of people are probably big fans of these games and want to get their hands on it, play, get some old nostalgia running through the veins. And doing a quick Google search, I found on Wikipedia that only 55 games out of the 4,491 originally released for PlayStation 2 are actually downloadable on the current systems, which is a fraction of a percent, and that is crazy. Okay, correction, is actually 1.2%, but you get my point. However, there is a catch. Moving on with the article, it says here, before you get excited, there's a catch. There is no word whether the PS5 will be able to read your personal collection of PS2 discs. As such, it appears more likely than not that retro PlayStation games brought over to the PlayStation 5 by Implicit Conversions will be digital, much like its previous work on PS1 and PSP games, which is locked behind a PlayStation Plus premium subscription. So everyone knows the premium subscription is the most expensive one, costs about $160 a year. And honestly, it's pretty safe to say that the majority of gamers who play on the PlayStation 5 do not own this premium subscription. I'm sure it's the minority. I don't know how many it is exactly. I could probably look it up. So these are the figures for June 2023. And as you can see, there are 33 million on Essential and only 8 on Premium, so the lion's share is probably on Essential. It does seem that Premium had more than Extra, but it is definitely being beaten out by the Essential, so let's just say that a lot of people would not be experiencing these upgrades when it comes to this entire emulator being made, unless you fork out more money to Sony. I'm actually curious to see how many people will be willing to jump to the PlayStation Premium subscription just to get the emulator and get the upgrades to all the games, if it turns out that's the way that it's going to work. But moving on, it says that this should not be a huge surprise for those who's been keeping tabs on the state of emulation over the years. Sony and others are proven willing to work with emulation as long as it allows them to resell an ever-expanding library of retro games to a newer audience. And hey, for general audience who may not be familiar with the emulation and didn't own the original game, it's a perfectly reasonable practice. For those out there who are looking for a vast retro collection and aren't feeling excited about having to buy every game again, less official practices are always tempting. Elsewhere in the industry, we saw Nintendo and Tropic Haze, the company behind Yuzu's Switch emulator, agreed to settle a lawsuit last week, resulting in the death of Yuzu and the company having to pay Nintendo $2.4 million. The team behind Yuzu would later put out a statement against piracy. So PlayStation really wants to get their old library of games out there for the public. There's a whole new generation of gamers that are willing to try retro games and get into it. Retro games are really cool because it's back from a different time where money was not the motive with these games. A lot of these companies really was making games just for the fun. They really wanted the fun aspect, wanted people to enjoy their products. They tried really hard. They put a lot of effort into these games because there wasn't updates like I could just get a file update. Like if your game came out janky back then, chances are it's going to stay like that until the very end. Critics are going to roast you and you might lose your business. Your entire company might fold just because you failed on one game. So stakes were really high. People were trying their best to get the best products out there for the general consumer, and it was a whole different time. So retro gaming is something that really should be preserved, really be encapsulated in a time capsule, because when you go back and play these games, you get a rush of nostalgia, a rush of everything comes back. The moment you played it, the first time pops back in your head and you just have a great time with it. So I really applaud the way that Sony is going about this entire thing, unlike the way Nintendo is moving with their emulators. And I feel like a lot can be learned from this, as the fall of Yuzu actually sparked a lot more emulators on the market. So I don't know guys, let me know what you think about this down in the comments below. I really appreciate your time, and as always, have a great day.